Extremist movie debate. Extremist movie debate. Extremist movie debate.
It's the Extremist movie debate. And tonight we're talking 2016's Green Room.
I am Joe.
I'm Ethan, and one of us is going to love it, one of us is going to hate it.
Let the coin decide their fate.
I hate it.
I love it. Hey guys, don't Nazi kill us. There's spoilers ahead.
Perfect. This movie holds a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, which makes it certified fresh. Ethan, since you hate the movie, this first question is for you. This comes from Sunny Bunch from Washington Free Beacon. Sunny says, Green Room is unsparing in its brutality and unsentimental in its treatment of its protagonist. When the violence finally gets going, things get ugly quickly. So briefly speak on how you feel about the tense and sometimes hyper-violent tone of the film. You have 1 minute.
Unnecessary. Is that brief enough? Yeah, it's gratuitous, and it's not really deserved. You have a movie that starts off like a music video and a stupid indie movie, and then it turns into limbs are getting half cut off and people are getting shot in the face with shotguns unexpectedly, and it's there's a system established where you hit beat by beat, you do the horror shtick, and it works, and it's established and time tested and proven. And when the movie breaks from that, you end up with weird tonal dissonance, and that's what this movie has. Is you don't quite understand what it is that you're watching, and you're not uncomfortable because of the characters and their situations they're in. You're uncomfortable because of the shoddy filmmaking, and you're uncomfortable because they chose to stray from already a proven formula and give you something a little bit different that doesn't work. I mean, kudos for trying, but you failed.
Okay, thank you. Joe, you have 30 seconds to respond.
No, this movie is very effective, and it does very well. I think it's much like Tarantino does it, and it's implied violence. And yes, you do see some grotesque, over the top, when he pulls his arm back in, you see it chopped up. But the camera doesn't zoom in on it, and the focal point is not that. It's all implied. So a lot of the shotgun stuff, you don't see a lot of the over the top violence. It's all kind of in your head, and it's all implied. And as far as the horror of it, this is just a straightforward horror movie.
Thank you, Joe. Ethan, you have 15 seconds to respond.
Excuse me, you see all of the violence and all of its glory. You see a person get half of his face blown off. You see somebody get dragged across a room by a knife stuck in their head. You see dogs chewing at people's throats over and over again, and their legs and their arms and their torsos. You see people get shot in the head and blood come out like a broken garden hose.
Joe, you have a final 15 to respond.
This is all low light stuff, very quick cuts, so we're not actually seeing it. That's what I'm saying. You get a lot of implied violence with it. So you're not seeing it in its full glory, because a lot of this stuff is shot in such low light that you can't even tell what's happening.
Okay, thank you. Joe, this question is for you. This comes from Owen Gleiberman of BBC.com. Owen says, the racists on display here are just The racists on display here are just glowering ciphers. They knit their eyebrows and gnash their teeth, but we never hear a word about why they believe, or what they believe and why. So in this movie, do you think it's important to understand why the white supremacists believe what they do, or is it kind of irrelevant? You have 1 minute.
It's totally irrelevant. It doesn't matter what they believe. It's established that they believe it, and it's established. It actually, where we find our protagonists and where we find the band stuck in this room has little to do with the racist tendencies of their captors. And you can see that they didn't want to be here, so it's their beliefs and human equality that kind of pushes them to the point to where they're in this room, because they're fuck you guys, and they're well, fuck you back, get out of here. And just they see something that they shouldn't see. But I think it's all beside the point. We know that they're pieces of shit, and that's all you got to know.
Okay, thank you, Ethan. You have 30 seconds to respond.
It would be a lot different if they weren't all, trained killers that had already an established, there's world building that went into this establishment that they find themselves in. There's a hierarchy with red shoelaces and people who have to earn their trust of their leader, and they go in there and they have to stage a crime scene and kill a whole bunch of people quietly. If you have to shoot, use close bursts because you don't want to have to dig the slugs out of multiple locations. It's ludicrous the amount of effort that they put into establishing these people without actually earning it.
Okay, thank you, Ethan. Joe, you have 15 seconds to respond.
I think they do earn because it's all established, and we know they're not actually trained killers. It's just doing the work. It's doing the daily grunt of being a piece of shit that gets them onto the hierarchy. And I think just established that this is like an isolated place. This is what they believe. Nothing's
Thank
so
you,
far
Joe.
out of reach to.
Ethan, you have a final 15 to respond.
I'm still stuck on the violence. This is the only thing people talk about in this movie is how it's hyper violent. How do you think that this movie doesn't focus on the violence to an excessive amount even?
Okay, well, we'll stop there and we'll actually open up the floor for you guys to discuss. You have 4 minutes to go back and forth and go.
Do you think Pulp Fiction's excessively violent?
No, Pulp Fiction isn't that violent.
Because it's all implied violence. But when it
Right,
came
I
out,
agree. Because there's only like one part on the screen where you see somebody's brains against a window.
when you
This
ca-
movie,
when you
however,
came out, you heard people saying like the violence in Pulp Fiction is too much. There's too much going on. This movie is just
it's because-
glorifying violence.
it's
And-
because
and you're
there's a
hearing
lot
the
of
same thing.
violent
You're hearing the
actions, but you
same
just don't
thing.
see it on the screen.
Yeah, and you're seeing the same thing with Green Room. You're seeing like this movie's so over the top with its violence, and I was surprised because I get very squeamish around like gore.
Implied violence is still violence, though. Like, I still don't want to watch. I still don't want my kid to watch Pulp Fiction and watch people constantly shooting each other, cutting each other up with
Your kid
katanas.
is 2 years old. Of course you don't want him to watch that, and I don't want my kid to watch Green Room. This is a movie for adults, so you can't say I don't want my kid to watch this because
But
it's a rated R movie.
That's not at all why I hate the movie. It's just to say that it's stupid because, oh, it's implied violence. It's okay. It's not okay.
I'm not saying it's okay because the question was, is this gore over the top? And I do not believe it is because it was shot in low life. It was shot with very fraction of a second visuals, so we're not actually seeing a lot of this violence to the glorification that you were trying to argue that we see it.
Do you need to adjust the brightness on your television, perhaps? Because I don't feel like any part of this was hard to detect what was happening at all.
No, you know what's happening because it's all implied. That's good filmmaking. You know what's happening because of the frames this man is essentially bunching together. You know exactly what's happening.
So
but
he's
we're
either
not
it's
seeing
either
that.
low light and censored, or it's all happening.
It's all happening, but it's all implied. Jesus Christ, are you having problems with that word?
I guess
You
I
have
don't
issues.
understand your definition of implied.
No, I mean, it's all implied. Like, the excess and the over-the-top gore that you're trying to argue and the glorification of it, I'm saying is not. Because yes, we see some of it, but a lot of it's implied, a lot of it's low light and very quick, so we're not seeing it to the extent that you were trying to argue.
What did you actually-
Do you have a problem with what I just said? Do
No,
you not
that's
understand
fine.
it?
I'm just curious.
Do I
like,
need to say it again?
if all you're doing is justifying the level of violence and the intensity of violence in this movie, what did you actually enjoy about this movie?
This movie is like we've talked about before, this movie is like John Wick. It's just a streamlined, simple plot that we drop in these very realistic characters and these likable characters.
They're not realistic.
They are realistic.
There's a hierarchy of Nazis based
Ooh,
on their shoelaces.
was not talking about the Nazis, eh, Ethan? Sorry.
Well,
I was
those are
talking
important
about-
characters.
Talking
They're
about
the
Anton Yelchin.
They're
Talking
the
about the
anti
band.
to the pro.
Talking about the band, actually. Those realistic characters. So we already have.
Also not that realistic.
So we
Makes stupid
already
decisions.
have a
There's actually
connection.
one point in this movie where they all walk out of the room. Finally, God, took them long enough. And they say, we should split up. And nobody says, no, that's a fucking stupid idea, like any normal person would.
Okay, so you've never been
They
in a situation.
would split up
This is
if
you.
they had the chance to, but in fact, right after that,
This
a lot
is
of them died.
this is you just assuming that you know exactly how to handle a crisis. None of these people are trained like killers. None of them in the
but these
movie
are
are
people
trained
in a
killers,
punk band,
actually.
so it's assumed
So
that
it's
they
a guy in a
probably
punk band.
absorbed some sort of media. They probably absorbed some sort of horror media, and know that to split up is the dumbest thing you can do.
Not when you're
In a
not
survival
when you have a bunch of
situation.
Nazis like with dogs
Surrounding the
surrounding
place.
them. So if they
group
split
together,
up-
that's your best. Strength
no,
in
no,
numbers.
if they-
If I learned anything from Dare in grade school, drug abuse resistance education, it's strength in numbers.
No, it's you split up so you have the greatest chance of one person getting out and telling the police. That's why you would split up. Just because you don't understand that, that's fine. If you want to bunch yourself into a group to where the Nazis can just shoot all of you in one big group, that's fine. Go ahead and do that.
But
it's
if,
wrong.
if you come
But it's
across a
wrong.
Nazi with a
Here's
gun,
the
then
thing.
you scatter. Absolutely, you serpentine through that hallway.
Serpentine?
But that's a move,
That's-
man. That's what you do.
I
You
know,
got
but
a
that's not
sniper
gonna
on
work.
you, you
That's not
serpentine.
gonna work. These are not. These
There
guys
are hallways
with
in this
buckshot.
movie.
They have buckshot. And on top of that, I want to go back to something.
They use a shotgun
I want to go back
once,
to something.
and they
A
kill the guy who's
couple
already a
episodes-
Nazi.
A couple episodes ago, I asked you. And how when you're too close to a situation, you don't know how to handle it. But when you're a little removed to it, you know the answer.
Okay, I'm
and
gonna
that's
stop you
exactly
guys
what
there.
you're doing right now.
Thank you. How'd you really feel about the movie?
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah, no, this movie's real good.
Absolutely adore it. It's unsettling, but it's great. I want to watch it multiple times. I mean, I've heard a lot of people say like, "Oh, this is a really awful movie that you have to be in the mood for." No, just go do it. It's
No,
fun.
it's really well done too. Like kind of like John Wick. This is like the John Wick for horror movies. It's like very streamlined.
I feel like there's a
Not a
lot
lot-
more going on in it than
Do
John
you?
Wick. Yeah, I think the characters are a lot more. John Wick, I love. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like the characters are very fleshed out in this movie. You understand there is a huge element of world building in this that works to its advantage. You see villains like even John Wick. The villains in that movie, they're all professional killers, and so there's always kind of just a sense of like, oh, they're going to do the best job that they possibly can. But in this, like at the end, you send the guys in with the shotgun and 3 shots kind of thing, and he goes down and he's terrified, he's scared. Like the first thing when he walks in the room is you see Anton Yelchin turned around, and then he turns around with face maker, which is a stupid idea on Anton Yelchin's place. Jump down that hole and yell for him. Don't stand there waiting for him to shoot you with the shotgun. But still, that guy hesitates because he's confused and then goes down the hole like, this is a trap, I don't like this. And he gets scared and he's breathing hard and he's terrified and then fumbles over his gun. Like they are all tangible humans dealing with this terrible, terrible situation, and it never feels like a group of people fighting against an invincible force, you know, like Mike Myers or some sort.
Yeah, everybody's human in this movie.
And I love that.
Even Patrick Stewart, who's like
Very
pretty
much.
cool, and then at the end you see him, he's just like, oh, all right. Like
Yeah.
maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. And also, this movie's got Patrick Stewart in it. Like
Underutilized, but great.
this movie with Anton Yelchin and Patrick Stewart, just those two people are just like, how did this movie get those? Like, it's got to be more than just a horror movie. And like you're arguing that it is more than a horror movie. I'm not going to completely jump on. I agree that
I think it's a thriller.
yeah, I think the characters are more fleshed out. But as far as comparing it to John Wick, I essentially say that just because the plot is so simple, and they don't rush it, and they just utilize exactly what they have within the genre that they're in.
It's refreshing. I mean, in an era where everything has to be such huge, massive scale in every aspect of that, to have something that's pretty contained in one building, almost entirely in like 3 rooms, it's impressive that they can pull off that level of, you know, gripping you emotionally while still having it that small.
And then also, just to touch on the gore real fast, it is very violent, but from hearing everybody talk about how gory and violent it is, there's only 2 times I was just like, ooh.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, no, like it's when he pulls his arm back in, and then when they cut the guy's torso.
The box cutter is the one.
Those are the 2 parts where
And
I
that comes out of nowhere,
yeah,
too.
those 2 parts are pretty brutal, but I do stand by the fact that there's a lot of implied violence, and the gore is shot in a way that it's not in your face or glorified, and it just works within the realm of this movie.
A lot of the violence in this movie I feel like was jarring because it was surprising, like the box cutter, but also like the Nazi who comes around, sorry, spoilers, and is like looking for the shotgun and all of a sudden gets his face blown off. You know, and that's a moment where in any other movie you're like, okay, we got a guy on the inside who's gonna help us do the last stand, get us out, and he's gonna hold the shotgun and pave the way for us and gets his head blown off. Those moments you don't expect, and they are violent in that moment, but it's mostly just you weren't anticipating it, and it just lets you see it, and that hits you harder than, you know, most things would.
Okay, well, what would you guys rate the movie?
I'll give this 9 lightning strikes and a bit of thunder.
9 and a ton of thunder. I really like how it you know, it's a punk band subverting Nazism just the way that the movie is subverting genres, but also I had a shitload of nightmares about fighting Nazis, so that's always a good sign in a cool way. So go ahead and like us or subscribe or whatnot, and you can comment below if you have any movies you'd like us to do in the future. We'll take requests. You can also write down a question you'd like about said movie, and Unpaid or Jeff will read it on the episode, and we can debate it.
All right. Thank you and good night.